Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Brief.
It looks like the fight against the EU court's labeling decision is far from over now, as dozens of ministers and parliament members from 25 different countries around the world meet in Jerusalem to protest the ruling. The EU High Court of Justice recently ruled that all Israeli Jewish products produced in Judea and Samaria, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights must be labeled as such. And pro-Israeli groups protest the ruling as discriminatory and as tacitly supporting BDS. But the visiting delegation, organized under the auspices of the Israel Allies Foundation, is also now joining in the fight. So meeting at the Prime Minister's office in the capital, Netanyahu thanks the delegation for their support, explaining that there is no substitute for speaking the truth in the face of lies. Meanwhile, the visit also included discussions about the U.S.'s change in settlement policy, and Netanyahu notes that the shift highlights an important historical fact, that Jews are not some foreign conquering entity, but rather a people returning to the homeland for which they're named, Judea. Then, in addition to Netanyahu, Likud MK Gideon Sa'ar addressed the group, similarly calling for an end to anti-Israel legislation. But he also condemned the international community's financial support for the PA, which pays terrorists and their families to attack Israeli civilians. While concluding the trip, the group will also tour settlements in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, and they'll meet with families of terror victims. Among the visiting MPs are representatives from Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, South Africa, Croatia, Estonia, Macedonia, Sierra Leone, Slovakia, Finland, Sweden, Zambia, and more. Now, as delegates from around the world meet in Jerusalem to support Israel against European rulings, the EU is preparing to meet for discussions on its Middle East policy. The 28-nation bloc will be convening in Brussels in January amidst growing concerns around Israel's settlement policies. And specifically, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell is saying that the ministers will deeply discuss the situation in the Middle East, as well as the two-state solution. The European Union views Israeli settlement expansion in Judea and Samaria as illegal, and it has long pushed for a two-state solution on the basis of pre-1967 borders and with Jerusalem as a shared capital with the Palestinian state. But real direct negotiations have been stalled for years, and now some EU nations believe unilateral action is required. Luxembourg's foreign minister, Jean Asselborn, for one, even says that it's time to consider recognizing Palestine as a state without Israel's involvement. And Ireland seems to agree amongst a small group of other countries too. That said, Asselborn insists that recognition would neither be a favor nor a blank check, but a simple recognition of the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Israeli officials, however, consistently reject unilateral actions, and they call instead on direct negotiations with the Palestinian Authority without preconditions. The Palestinian Authority has yet to answer these calls. Seasonal showers are continuing in the Jewish state, and their effects seem to be getting more dangerous. For the second day in a row, heavy flooding across the country has trapped drivers and damaged homes and infrastructure. On Sunday, at least 6 people were rescued, including a pregnant woman from flooding in a tunnel. And then Monday, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and parts of Tel Aviv had all flooded over as well. Many cars had even become submerged under the 2 inches of rainfall, especially in underground garages. And in Yavne, 2 drivers were also rescued after getting stuck in the standing waters. Meanwhile, the Israel Nature and Parks Authority is temporarily closing hiking trails and nature reserve areas from the public due to the overflowing riverbeds. Thankfully, though, no injuries have been reported from the flooding Monday night. The IDF soldier who was struck by lightning on Sunday, on the other hand, remains in serious condition. And still, there were several close calls. All IDF exercises in the Northern Command have even been put on pause following a Merkava tank overturning. And finally, the weather is predicted to move away from the country Tuesday night, which is good because the storm systems and infrastructure desperately need that time to recover ahead of another coming storm expected Thursday. For a lifetime of achievements and dedication to human rights, political freedom, the Jewish people, and the State of Israel, former Soviet dissident Natan Sharansky is now being awarded the 2020 Genesis Prize. The prize's foundation announced the $1 million prize winner on Tuesday, and the ceremony is scheduled for June 18, 2020 in Jerusalem. And Jewish agency head Isaac Herzog, who also sits on the Genesis Prize selection committee, explains that Sharansky is a true Jewish hero and an outstanding human being. Sharansky first made headlines in the mid-1980s when he was released from a Russian labor camp. He was a prisoner of conscience, and he spent much of his imprisonment enduring solitary confinement and hunger strikes. But in 1986, and upon his release from prison, he immigrated to Israel, where he continued to work in politics, mostly on behalf of the millions of Jews from former Soviet nations who also came to Israel. He was a Knesset member, he served in multiple ministerial positions, and he even represented the Likud party in 2006. Then he moved on to becoming the head of the Jewish Agency, the world's largest Jewish nonprofit group, where he served for 2 terms ahead of the current chief, Isaac Herzog. And finally, following Genesis Prize tradition, Sharansky will be donating the $1 million in prize money to nonprofit organizations, while vowing to use his time as a prize laureate to speak out against anti-Semitism.
That's all for now, but for more news from Israel, remember to like ILTV on Facebook and on Instagram, and to subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.